Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a quiet rancher discovers a shiny suburban HOA has claimed a forgotten dirt road on his land, things take a sharp turn. What begins as tire tracks in the dust soon spirals into a battle of pride, property, and power, with one man holding the key to everyone's escape. My name is Ethan Caldwell. I'm 37, an engineer by trade and a rancher by blood. I inherited my grandfather's land a few years back, 300 acres of open fields, old oaks, and history carved into every creaking fence post and rusty nail. It's the kind of land that's more than property, it's legacy. I keep the house in decent shape, tend the vegetable plots, and even maintain the old windmill out by the east pasture, mostly out of stubborn pride. But there's one odd little feature on my ranch that never mattered much, until recently. There's a narrow dirt path that cuts through the far corner of my property. My grandfather used to call it the back stretch, a rough old track that once connected farms, long before paved roads and GPS. For decades, it sat unused, overgrown in places, barely recognizable as a road. It wasn't even on most modern maps. Just a dry, bumpy trail tucked away in a patch of mesquite and scrub that no one paid attention to. Not even me. But things change. A few years ago, a development popped up just beyond that back corner, Crystal Valley, they call it. A shiny pastel-colored HOA suburb that grew like a weed where cow pasture used to be. Cookie-cutter homes, identical mailboxes, and a homeowner association obsessed with uniform lawns and rulebooks thicker than the Bible. I kept my distance. They were out there, and I was in here. Simple. Then, little by little, I started noticing more tire tracks along the old road. At first, I figured someone got lost or cut across during construction. No big deal, but the trickle turned to a flow. Pickup trucks, SUVs, sedans. They all started using the dirt road to get in and out of Crystal Valley. Turns out it was faster than looping around to the main highway, especially during rush hour. One morning, I even saw a school bus bouncing its way down the trail like it was paved. Still, I let it go. I'm not the type to stir a fuss unless there's a good reason. I figured they'd stop once construction was done, but the road didn't go quiet. It got busier. They treated it like a public road. My road. But I shrugged it off. Maybe that was my first mistake. It started like any other morning. I was sipping my first cup of coffee on the porch, the kind of quiet sunrise that only a ranch can give you. Hazy gold light stretching over the fields, the distant groan of the windmill, a couple of crows arguing over something in the barn rafters. Peaceful, until I saw the flash of metal down by the old road. At first, I thought it was sunlight glinting off a parked car. But it wasn't a car. I set my mug down, grabbed my jacket, and headed toward the east boundary. As I got closer, my stomach sank. They had built a dam fence right across my land. A brand new metal gate stood across the dirt road, flanked by two sections of chain-link fencing bolted into the ground like they were staking a claim. And get this, a big plastic sign hung from the fence with bright blue letters. Welcome to Crystal Valley HOA, Controlled Access Zone. My property, my road. And now they were claiming it like some suburban conquistadors planting a flag. And it got worse. A man in a black polo shirt and reflective vest stood in front of the gate, arms crossed, radio on his hip, badge on his chest that said Crystal Valley HOA, Security. He had the kind of smug expression people wear when they think they're in charge. I asked him who gave him the authority to be here. HOA directive, he said flatly. This is now part of our expanded access zone. Residents have safety concerns. You'll need clearance to pass through this gate, sir. Sir? I nearly laughed. I told him he was standing on my land. He gave me a blank look, like I didn't understand how things worked. So I called the number printed on the sign. After a few rings, a clipped voice answered, Karen from the Crystal Valley HOA. I introduced myself and asked what the hell was going on. Oh, Mr. Caldwell, she said sweetly, like she was talking to a wayward child. This is part of our infrastructure enhancement. We've improved the entry route to Crystal Valley to better serve our residents. I assure you, it's entirely in the community's best interest. You should consider joining the HOA. It would simplify access procedures. I didn't yell, I didn't argue. I just said thank you for the clarification and hung up, because if they thought this was checkmate, they forgot I play a different game entirely. I didn't react the way they expected. No threats, no shouting, no social media tirade. That's not how I play. You don't survive as an engineer or a rancher without learning to think 6 moves ahead. So I went into what I call chess mode. While they were busy flexing imaginary authority, I rolled up my sleeves and started digging. Not literally, not yet. First, I needed paperwork. I drove into town and spent the better part of the day in the dusty back rooms of the county records office, poring over maps older than my grandfather's barn. The clerk was kind enough, mostly curious why someone under the age of 80 was interested in historical easements. I explained the situation, and her eyebrows rose just enough to show I wasn't the first landowner to run into HOA nonsense. That's when I struck gold. Tucked inside a battered leather-bound ledger was a servitude agreement from 1894, hand-signed and stamped in wax. The dirt road, my dirt road, was originally a private utility corridor for water and cattle transport between ranches. Over time, portions had been leased under temporary access permits to neighboring properties, but those permits expired. All of them, including the one Crystal Valley had used during their construction phase. It hadn't been renewed in 3 years. Legally speaking, the land, the access point, the entire road, all mine. I had full rights of use, blockage, and control. They had nothing. No legal easement, no public right-of-way, just a bunch of assumptions built on an expired agreement and a whole lot of arrogance. I called my lawyer, Naomi Grant, smart as a whip and just as sharp. I sent her copies of the deeds, maps, and servitude records. She read through it all and called me back 30 minutes later. "Ethan," she said, "not only are you in the clear to block access, but what they did, installing a fence and gate, assigning a security guard on your land, could qualify as attempted land encroachment or even adverse possession if they tried to make it permanent." That was all I needed to hear. The very next day, I filed a formal property boundary enforcement order with the county. I registered the servitude and easement revocation in the land records. Then I got to work. I called a local contractor I trusted, one of those no-nonsense guys who doesn't ask questions, just builds what you ask. We installed a steel post fence across the full eastern stretch, running parallel to the Crystal Valley Gate, but this time with an electronic remote-controlled gate of my own design, complete with license plate cameras and motion detection. By sundown, my message was clear. The road was no longer theirs to stroll through. If they wanted access, they'd have to come knocking. The real fun began Monday morning. I was already awake before dawn, sipping coffee in my kitchen, watching the monitor connected to my new security system. The camera feed showed a row of red taillights forming like ants near the gate. Crystal Valley's residents, dozens of them, idling in confusion. The HOA's fancy gate had been untouched, locked in place, their security guy nowhere to be seen. But my gate, my gate was very much closed, and this time, they were on the wrong side of it. By 7:15 a.m., my phone buzzed. Caller ID, Karen, Crystal Valley HOA. I picked up. "Morning," I said calmly, knowing damn well why she was calling. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, voice tight with a smile that sounded like it was gritted between clenched teeth. "We're experiencing some complications. It seems your new installation is preventing our residents from accessing the highway." "You don't say," I replied, taking a slow sip of coffee. "Yes, and given the circumstances, I'm sure this is just an oversight. We'd appreciate it if you could open the gate." I leaned back in my chair, watching one woman in a Lexus trying to three-point turn on the gravel, nearly backing into a mailbox. "You know," I said, "when you put up your gate, you never asked me. You never checked if it was legal. You never even informed me that someone would be stationed on my property. You just assumed it belonged to you." A pause. "Well," Karen snapped, dropping the polite tone, "our understanding was that the road was part of Crystal Valley's extended infrastructure. We've been using it for years." "Right, and I let you, until you built a fence across my land and tried to claim it as your own." There was silence on the line for a moment. Then, almost whispering, she said, "Are you really going to keep the gate closed? People have jobs. Kids need to get to school." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out toward the pasture glowing in the morning sun. "Karen," I said, "you wanted control. You got it. But here's the thing. I control the exit." Then I hung up. For the next hour, I sat and watched the chaos unfold like a live episode of suburban panic. Horns honking, parents yelling, people getting out of their cars trying to push the gate like it might magically swing open from collective whining. By 9 a.m., traffic had mostly dispersed. Some must have found the long route out through the rear of the subdivision, an extra 20-minute detour. Others probably just called in late. But the message was sent loud and clear. This road wasn't theirs anymore, and if they wanted to leave Crystal Valley without begging, they were going to need a better strategy. By Tuesday morning, the tone had changed. I woke up to a knock on my door, an actual physical knock. That alone told me things had escalated. Most folks these days prefer email, texts, or passive-aggressive HOA newsletters. But when I opened the door and saw a small, nervous-looking man in a button-down shirt clutching a leather portfolio, I knew they'd sent an emissary. "Mr. Caldwell," he began, adjusting his glasses. "I'm Greg Martin, Assistant Vice President of Crystal Valley's HOA Board. I was hoping we could talk." I stepped aside and gestured to the porch chairs. "You're not here to tell me I've violated community aesthetic standards, are you?" He chuckled weakly and shook his head. "No, sir. Honestly, I think we might have overstepped." I let him talk. They were, as expected, deeply sorry for any confusion. Karen, according to Greg, had acted with initiative when the gate and fence were installed. The HOA had simply assumed, based on old maps and habit, that the road was a shared community asset. No one intended any harm. Blah, blah. When he finally stopped spinning his apology, I leaned forward. "Greg," I said, "do you know what would have solved all of this?" He blinked. A conversation." "Exactly. A conversation. Before the fence. Before the guard. Before Karen tried to plant a flag in my front yard. But now we're in contract territory." He nodded quickly, flipping open his folder like he'd hoped I'd say that. "We're prepared to negotiate access," he said. "Temporarily, at least, until we can work out something more formal." I smiled. "You already had access. You lost it. Now, if you want it back, here's how it works." I laid it out clearly, watching his eyes widen with each bullet point. Access hours are 7 years to 9 in the morning and 5 to 7 in the evening. No exceptions. Outside of that, your board will submit requests to my email, minimum 2 hours notice, for one-time gate openings. All vehicles must be registered. No deliveries, no guests, no maintenance without prior approval. Greg swallowed hard. "And just to be clear," I added, "this isn't a negotiation. This is an offer. I'm letting you save face, but I'm under no obligation to reopen anything. In fact, I could leave that gate closed for the next decade and no one could say a damn thing." He closed his folder slowly. "I'll take this to the board." I nodded. "Do that. And tell Karen the next time she wants to improve infrastructure, she should try Google Maps first." By the end of the day, the Crystal Valley HOA had accepted my terms in writing. And the next morning, at exactly 6:58 a.m., I received the first of many emails. Subject: Morning Access Request. "Mr. Caldwell, please confirm gate access for residents between 7 or 9 for this morning. Thank you." Crystal Valley HOA. I didn't respond. I just pressed the button. Let the game begin. I knew it was coming the moment they started saying "temporarily" in every email. Crystal Valley wasn't built on humility. HOA types like Karen weren't the kind to accept boundaries, especially ones they didn't draw themselves. For a few weeks, things settled into a bizarre routine. Emails twice a day requesting gate access, some polite, some curt. One was written entirely in all caps like yelling would speed things up. But underneath the forced civility, I could feel the tension brewing. I saw it in the HOA meeting notes someone anonymously forwarded to me, lines about exploring legal remedies and reclaiming community easement rights. One memo even claimed I had weaponized access. I kept the receipts. Then it came. A certified letter from a law firm in town delivered right to my gate. The Crystal Valley HOA was suing me for unlawful obstruction of a historical access route, citing community reliance precedent and some creatively interpreted zoning maps. Their claim? That the dirt road had become an established right-of-way due to long-term use, and that by installing my own gate and imposing restrictions, I had unreasonably burdened the neighborhood's ability to function. I handed it to Naomi, my attorney. She read it, raised an eyebrow, and said, "This is going to be fun. We didn't just prepare a defense. We launched a full counteroffensive." First, Naomi filed a motion to dismiss, attaching copies of the original land deeds, the expired servitude agreements, and photos of the illegal Crystal Valley gate they'd installed on my property. We included records showing that Crystal Valley's own board had failed to renew access contracts twice and that no legal easement had ever been granted to begin with. Second, we hit them with a counterclaim for attempted land encroachment, unauthorized construction, and trespassing, plus damages for property disruption, legal fees, and stress-related interference with my ability to maintain ranch operations. The sum we sought, $120,000. The trial was short, brutal, and oddly satisfying. Karen showed up in court dressed like she was attending a country club brunch, all pearls and posture. Her lawyer tried the community need angle, but the judge didn't bite. He focused on one thing: the deed. Your client had no legal right to the road, he said plainly. They never renewed access, never paid for maintenance, and installed a structure on land that wasn't theirs. This isn't a misunderstanding, it's negligence. The verdict? Case dismissed. Counterclaim upheld. HOA was ordered to pay me $120,000 in damages, remove their gate, and enter into a formal maintenance and access contract under my terms if they wish to continue using the road. Karen looked like she swallowed a lemon whole. Her board looked ready to resign en masse. And I walked out of that courtroom with legal confirmation of something I already knew. When you build on arrogance and forget to check the foundation, eventually it all comes crashing down. There's something strangely satisfying about receiving an email with the subject line "Daily Gate Access Request," especially when it's from someone who tried to annex part of your land without asking. After the court ruling, Crystal Valley HOA did exactly what the judge ordered. They tore down their gate, removed the fence, and signed a formal access agreement drafted by my attorney. Every clause in that document had been reviewed, double-checked, and legally bulletproofed. I now held complete control over that road, legally, procedurally, and physically. If they so much as wanted to repaint the gravel, they had to ask me first. The best part? They were paying me. Under the new agreement, Crystal Valley had to deposit a monthly access and maintenance fee into my account. Not a fortune, but enough to make every email they sent feel like rent on their own pride. It was poetic. And the emails, they were glorious. Every morning, like clockwork, I'd wake up to messages from the HOA secretary. Some were rigidly formal, full of awkward phrasing, clearly filtered through a lawyer. Others tried to be chipper. "Hope you're having a lovely morning, Mr. Caldwell," as if that sugary tone would somehow make up for last month's lawsuit. Then came the special requests. "Mr. Caldwell, we have a landscaping truck arriving at 10:15 a.m. to service community median strips. Would it be possible to allow temporary access outside the standard 7 years and 9 years time window?" Or, "Hello, Mr. Caldwell. A real estate showing is scheduled for a potential buyer at 3:00 p.m. We'd greatly appreciate a one-time gate opening for visitor access." At first, I responded to each with a brief approved or denied, but after a while, I realized I didn't need to say anything. The system was automated. They could submit requests, but unless they were within the time slots, that gate wasn't moving. My favorite reply became silence. Sometimes silence sends the clearest message. It didn't take long for the HOA to adjust their schedules. Contractors started arriving before sunrise. Book club carpools lined up outside the gate like they were waiting for a Black Friday sale, and delivery trucks circled the neighborhood twice just to avoid getting stuck. Karen. I hadn't heard from her since the trial, but I knew she was still president, at least for now. Her name was at the bottom of every monthly email, tucked neatly beneath respectfully Crystal Valley HOA. The same woman who once smugly offered me advice on approved paint colors now had to ask permission to let Amazon drop off a package. There's something about controlled access that teaches people manners real fast. No one honked at the gate anymore. No one tried to force it open. If anything, they crept through like guests crossing royal land, because in a way, they were. And I made sure they didn't forget it. About a month after the dust settled, I decided to install one final touch, something to commemorate this strange little war over a dirt road. The new steel gate, now a permanent fixture, gleamed under the morning sun like a monument. It had cost a bit more than I'd budgeted, but it was worth every cent. Right in the center, I bolted a large brass plaque. The lettering was bold, easy to read, and impossible to miss. "Welcome to Crystal Valley HOA. To enter your own neighborhood, please remember to ask nicely." Beneath it, on a separate steel panel, I had engraved the schedule. Gate access hours: 7 here's AM, 9 here's AM, 5 here's PM, 7 here's PM. All other times, subject to the owners. Discretion. Requests may be delayed or denied. Have a pleasant day. Some folks laughed when they saw it. Others took photos. A few shook their heads, but no one dared complain. Not anymore. The HOA had learned its lesson, and I had made damn sure they wouldn't forget it. Life on the ranch returned to its usual rhythm. Mornings spent repairing fence lines, afternoons working on engine parts in the barn, the occasional whiskey by the fire pit at sunset. I'd still get the daily email from the HOA, always on time, always carefully worded, and each time I'd glance at it, smile, and hit the button to open the gate. Sometimes I wouldn't. Sometimes I'd wait a few extra minutes just to remind them that convenience is a privilege, not a guarantee. One afternoon, I saw a realtor parked outside the gate, showing a young couple a property on the far side of the neighborhood. I overheard them say, "It's a beautiful place, but what's with the gate?" The realtor's response made me chuckle. "Oh, that? It's part of a private agreement. Long story. The guy who owns the land, he's a little territorial." Damn right I am. Word spread, of course. People from other HOAs asked me for advice. A few called me a local legend. One even mailed me a t-shirt that read, "My road, my rules." I wore it once during a grocery run. Got 3 nods and a fist bump from complete strangers. As for Karen, she stayed quiet. I suspect the board muzzled her after the lawsuit. I occasionally see her car pass through the gate at exactly 7:01. Never early, never late. I imagine she glares at the sign every time she drives by. Good, because power isn't always about making noise. Sometimes it's about not needing to speak at all, just pressing a button and watching everyone else wait. And that's how it stayed. A rancher's land, a forgotten road, a fence built on entitlement and torn down by ownership. No HOA bylaw, no smug clipboard, and no steel gate of theirs could ever beat the truth carved into my deed and backed by generations of grit. This land was mine, and now so is the exit.